And now for something a little different. Normally when I talk about teaware on this channel, I'm talking about artists and potters and philosophy and history, but today this is a tech review. I've got a new space and I wanted to buy a new kettle to use on these YouTube videos, and I thought, why not get one of the nice trendy ones you see plastered all over social media? So I got two of them and I'm going to compare them. I've lived with these for like a week and I have some thoughts about which one I prefer and which one I'm going to stick with. Both of these are very expensive high-end kettles and probably not what I'd recommend to the everyday person making tea, but if you want to spend a lot of money on a kettle and you're really interested in brewing tea or even coffee or making really nice hot water, then kettles. Neither of these kettles was sent to us for free. This is not a sponsored video. These are just my opinions on these kettles, having used them for a little bit. So without further ado, let's look at the specs. First up, the Balmuda MoonKettle, a newcomer to the temperature control electric kettle world. As of this video, this one retails at $260 and comes in two colors, black and white. It has a power of 1,200 watts and a capacity of 900 milliliters and comes to a boil in about 5 minutes, depending on your temperature, altitude, etc., etc. The body is made of stainless steel, coated in this sort of matte black finish. The lid is made of ABS plastic, and the same plastic is used on the handle, which is wrapped around a stainless steel core. This is the fellow Corvo EKG Pro, and this one retailed for $200, but there is a slightly cheaper one at $170 if you get it in black without the nice maple wood accents. It comes in a few different colors. Right now there is this light blue, a dark blue, a white, a black with wood handles, and I think like a cream color. There's a lot of different colors. This is a really cute blue. I picked this one. The Corvo is made of stainless steel, including the lid. The lid is also stainless steel, and there is a silicone gasket around it that seals it. This also has a power of 1,200 watts and the same capacity of 900 milliliters, and also comes to a boil at around 5 minutes. Now let's move on to the features. Both of these are temperature control kettles. This one has a heating range of 50 to 100 Celsius, and this one has a heating range of 40 to 100 Celsius. You can adjust the temperature to a 1 degree increment on the MoonKettle using this little dial on the side, and on the Corvo, you can adjust it to every 0.5 of a degree Celsius using this little dial. They both do Fahrenheit. I didn't really test the Fahrenheit, I think in Celsius when it comes to water, but they both can do Fahrenheit. Both kettles have a hold feature. The MoonKettle holds for 30 minutes and the Corvo has an adjustable hold feature anywhere between 15 minutes and an hour. On top of this, both kettles have sound options to make a sound when the kettle is done heating. The Corvo has a more traditional beep that has an adjustable volume, while the MoonKettle has 3 soft, minimalistic Zen sounds that are kind of unique and interesting and cute. The third one is supposed to be inspired by temple bells in Kyoto. I can see it. In addition to the soft sounds, the MoonKettle also has this really cute ring light that sort of looks like there's a fire beneath the kettle while it's heating up. And if you turn the sounds off, the light changes the way it sort of pulsates and glows to let you know that the kettle is done heating. I think that's really cute. This doesn't have that. It's also worth noting that this is very much inspired by Tetsubin, one of these things. As far as features go, that's about it for the MoonKettle, whereas the Corvo probably has too many features for its own good. On top of the hold function, it has a pre-boil function, which means it'll heat water to the boil and then let it cool to the desired temperature. This is good if you really want to like sanitize your water before drinking it. It's a common feature on Japanese things. I'm surprised that Balmuda doesn't have it. There's also a scheduling feature where you can have the kettle heat up to a desired temperature at the same time every day. You can have that happen once, you can have that happen daily. I haven't tried that yet, but I'm assuming it works. On top of this scheduling feature, there's also a clock, because you have to have a clock to have a schedule, so it has a clock built in. You can change that to analog or digital. On top of a regular clock, there's also a stopwatch, so you can time your brews for coffee pour over or your infusions for tea. There's also an altitude setting to compensate for different altitudes. which is a bit weird because traditional cheapo standard electric kettles just use the steam temperature, so they don't need an altitude setting. So I'm not sure why this one does, but it has one. And there's also language changes and a little built-in mini game if you're bored. And there's also a guide mode, which gives you different presets for brewing different types of teas or coffee to make it easier than having to fine-tune to the right temperature if you don't want to deal with that. And lastly, you can update the firmware of the kettle base using the Fellow app. So if there's any updates to the software, it can stay up to date. As far as the pour goes, both of these pour very beautifully. This one handles kind of like a traditional tetsubin. It doesn't really dribble, it pours quite smoothly. As for this one, it also doesn't drip at all, but it doesn't pour quite as nicely when you're going at like full tilt. It just sort of gurgles out, but that's fine. Both of these pour fast enough for tea, unlike the Stag version from Fellow, which has the really, really thin gooseneck, which is way too slow for making tea with. It's great for pour-overs, bad for tea. As far as ergonomics, the Corvo has a really nice sort of thumb rest on the wooden handle, and it's very intuitive to pour one-handed. Meanwhile, the MoonKettle, because of its traditional tetsubin style design, feels like you have to hold it with two hands. You don't actually, because the lid is sort of gasketed on there, unlike a regular tetsubin where it's just sort of resting on the lid, but you can use it with one hand. Moving on to the ergonomics of the base, the Corvo has a stepped dial, which controls the temperature and lets you move around the menu selection, and the dial also functions as a button. There is also a secondary button which lets you access the menu. On the MoonKettle, there are two buttons, a like on-off start cancel button and a settings button on the top. They're quite plasticky and clicky, but otherwise fine. On the side of the base is a stepped dial that lets you adjust the temperature and also cycle through some of the menu options in the settings. As far as user interface goes, the Corvo has a high-resolution full-color display, which is round, and on the MoonKettle, it is a more traditional black and white backlit LCD display. As for the user experience, for the MoonKettle, you turn it on by pressing the start button, then you can select your temperature, hit the start button again, and it will begin to heat. Note, you can't press these buttons too quickly, otherwise it won't actually register. You have to like wait a tiny bit, which I found a little bit annoying, but once you get used to it, it's not too bad. At any point during the heating cycle, you can press the hold button and that will let the kettle know that you want it to hold the temperature for up to 30 minutes. While the MoonKettle is marketed as having this hold feature so you can do multiple infusions of a tea or back-to-back brews of coffee, you can't actually do this because as soon as you take the kettle off the base, the whole thing turns off and you put it back on the base and you have to go through the startup procedure all over again. And I found this to be the most annoying part of this kettle. It's fine if you want to make 1 cup of tea or 1 bowl of matcha, but if you're picking up the kettle and putting it down and using it again at any point in your routine, then you'll have to hit the start button again, select your temperature, hit the start button a second time to confirm that temperature, and then you can let it heat up to the temperature again, and then you can use it. And then you take it off the base and it turns off again and repeat the cycle. You also can't change the temperature while it is heating up. If you decided that you don't want 80 degrees Celsius, but you wanted 75, you have to turn it off, turn it back on again, select the temperature that you really wanted, and then hit the start button again. Imagine you had to turn off your television every time you wanted to change the channel. For a kettle that is supposed to bring the ideas of Zen and minimalism, this isn't inspiring a state of mushin. I'm very much annoyed at the kettle every time this happens. Meanwhile, with the Corvo, you can press the dial to turn it on and select your temperature and then let go and it will begin heating to that temperature. At any point during this heating phase, you can change the temperature and it will decide to heat to the new temperature, or let it cool if you change it to a lower temperature. The hold function is automatic. You can change that in the settings, but default it will hold for 30 minutes. You can take it off the base and put it back on and it will stay holding for the allotted time. You can also pick it up during the heating, use it, and put it back on the base, and it will continue heating until it reaches your target temperature. During the entire heating process, it will display your target temperature as well as the current temperature, which is nice to know because sometimes I'll forget what I set the target temperature to, and I don't have to turn it off and back on again to see that. I usually like to take it off the base while I'm preheating something. So like if I'm making matcha, I can use the kettle at like 60 degrees to preheat the bowl, rinse the whisk, do tasentoshi, put it back on the base, and let it heat up to the full 80 degrees Celsius while I'm scooping my tea. So it saves a lot of time. I can take it off the base, use it, and put it back down. Whereas with the MoonKettle, you have to wait for it to come to the full temperature, then you can use it, because if you interrupt it while it's heating, you have to start it all over again. Which is, I know, a minor grievance, but this is a $260 kettle, and at this price point, this is a relatively basic feature, and it's kind of annoying that this doesn't have it. If it were like a $50 kettle or like a $30 kettle, it would make total sense, but again, this is $260. It's adorable and beautiful, but annoying. As far as temperature accuracy goes, I found them both to be pretty accurate to what the temperature reading says when you check with a thermometer, so that's great. That may sound like a silly point, but there are some temperature control kettles that I've used in the past where you set it to 80 degrees and it'll heat to 80 degrees and then turn off, which sounds like it's a normal, perfectly fine thing to do, but then all the residual heat in the kettle will make it go to like 90 degrees. So if you set it to 80, it'll go to 80 and it won't overshoot it if there's like no water in the kettle, which has happened in the past with other kettles I've used, so it's nice that these don't do that. One of the unique features of the MoonKettle is that if you have the sounds on, it'll play a heating noise once you start to heat it up. This lasts for like 30 seconds, so it won't last the full boil, but it is a way to let you know that the kettle is beginning to heat before you hear the sound of the water boiling. I'll let you decide if this is a good sound. I don't know of any other kettle that does that. That's quite a unique feature to this one. Overall, there's a lot I like about the MoonKettle. I think it is an incredibly beautiful shape. Most of the sort of electric temperature control kettles look more like this, and so having this sort of traditional top handle Tetsubin style design is really cool, and I think it's really nice to use and hold. I also think that the LED light in the base is also really nice. It adds to the aesthetic. It looks beautiful on the counter while it's heating. It's very soft, very minimal, not too distracting, but quite pretty. And I like the option of using these non-standard sounds. As opposed to a beep or a click, you get this. That being said, the inability to keep the temperature constant while taking the kettle off the base and then putting it back down is practically a deal breaker for me. Again, if this were a cheap kettle, I wouldn't mind, but this is a premium product with a premium price tag. And there's no possibility of fixing this with a firmware update because this doesn't connect to anything. And I do like that this isn't connected to the internet, that it's a very minimalistic design with very minimalistic features. It just boils water to the temperature you want it to, but these tiny little complaints make the whole user experience more annoying than peaceful, at least for me. With the Corvo, I think it's also a beautiful shape and design, a little less timeless, a little more modern and sleek, although it does remind me a little bit of those Fujigata kamas that you can see in tea ceremony rooms. Overall, this has a much more pleasant user experience. The only downside potentially is the fact that it has a lot of features, almost too many features, but you don't have to use all of them if you don't want to. If you just want to heat water to a certain temperature, that's the first thing that comes on when you turn it on, and that's all you need to use it for if you want to. And at a cheaper price than the MoonKettle, for me, it's an easy choice which one I'll go with. Although this is really pretty, but if I want something that looks like this, I'll just use one of these. Before you ask, why is a gooseneck kettle less ideal for tea than a more traditionally spouted kettle? It's because they pour really slowly. Sometimes it's nice to have a precise pour, but with some gooseneck kettles, especially this one, the fellow Stag EKG, which is everyone's favorite gooseneck kettle, the maximum pour rate is just ridiculously slow. So if you're filling a Kyusu that has anything more than a 50 milliliter capacity, it takes forever. This might not be an issue unless you're doing short brew times. So for the second steep of a sencha, or maybe you're doing flash steeps of a black tea, you want to fill the teapot really quickly and then empty it really quickly. You'll be here for ages filling it with a gooseneck, then you have to put it down and then put the lid on and then pour the tea. At that point, it's no longer a flash steep, you've been there for 30 seconds. Other than that, goosenecks are great, just not ideal for tea for me. Just to reiterate, this isn't a comprehensive review of all of the electric kettles out of there, or a recommendation of what kettle you should get. This is just my comparison between two very popular kettles that are admittedly very expensive. And between them, I prefer this one, and this is the one that you're likely to see in the videos going forward. And also this one. Once again, you don't need kettles this fancy to make a good cup of tea. All you need is something that heats water. A pot on the stove, a mug in the microwave, these will still work. You just need some way to heat the water. And if you want to heat it to a desired temperature, you can use a thermometer, or you can get a more affordable temperature controlled kettle. But if you want a lot of fancy features and enjoy playing with tech, then these are some lovely kettles to use. This will probably be the only gear review that you'll see on this channel, so subscribe if you want to see more videos about tea, teaware, and tea culture. Probably not more electric kettles. Unless some really new, amazing electric kettle comes to the market, then maybe. But for now, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know which one you would pick in the comments down below, or if you have your own preferred kettle. See you in the next video. Have a nice day.